Hello. So, many years ago, before I wanted to be a writer and director, I desperately wanted to be an actor. And I spent a year auditioning for all of the London top drama schools. And there was a drama school called Drama Centre, which was my first choice. And the morning came for my audition. And I woke up, I got ready, I was really nervous, really anxious and excited. And I suddenly realised, just before I began to make the journey, that there was a tube strike. So in a sudden panic, I called a taxi. And the taxi arrived, I got in, and as we pulled out onto a busy high street, I realised that I didn't have any cash on me to pay him. So I asked him to stop, and I got out of the taxi, stepped into the road, turned my head and saw a van hurtling towards me at full speed. And in a moment of sheer instinct, I threw myself underneath the van between the wheels and sort of skidded along the floor, remaining relatively unscathed compared to what could have happened. And the poor van driver helped me out from under his van, and he was very shaken, and he asked me if I was all right. And my main priority was I have to get to this audition. This is the number one thing on my mind. So in that very British way, I thanked him and profusely apologized, saying, I'm sorry, I'm a complete idiot, and went to the cash machine, got my cash, got back in the cab, and we drove as fast as he could drive and pulled up outside the audition, and I ran down the corridor and made it just in time. And then I went in and I did my audition, which was 2 monologues, and that went fine. And then afterwards, I sat down to have an interview with the head of acting. And he said this to me: why do you want to act? Why do you want to make theatre? And I was completely paralyzed. I was completely flummoxed. I had absolutely no idea what to say. I mean, I knew I wanted it so much that I'd risked my life 30 minutes before, but I'd never really formulated in my mind why. I'd never really asked myself that question. I just did. So I kind of mumbled something lamely about escapism and entertainment. And as I said it felt crap. And clearly he wasn't very impressed, because he just frowned at me through his glasses and said, right. And that was that. And this was about 10 years ago, and to this day, I still ask myself that question all the time. Why do I make theatre? And I guess the real question is, why is theatre important? And one of the answers is clear right now in what we're doing. I mean, I just told you a little story, which is in itself a piece of theatre, and when I told it, I looked at you. I engaged with you. You may not have said anything during my story, but your presence here and your personalities in some way shaped the way I told that story. And I could tell it again, at another time, another place, in front of another audience, and it would never be as it is today. There is something about live performance that is unique. And I guess we could say that television and film reach people in their millions, but I think there's something passive about watching a screen. And when we're present at a live event, as an audience, we're active and engaged. And now, I guess now that I understand the value of this amazing platform, theatre, what do I want to make theatre about? I mean, what are the burning things that I feel I need to share with an audience? And here I'm going to get into some more specifics about who I am and what I do as a theatre maker, because with me, and this is what I do, the personal is very political. And this, for me, this realization was a eureka moment for me in my work. A realization that my little stories, my subjective take on the world, could in some ways serve the bigger picture. And that's what storytelling is, right? It's the microcosm, the little story, which reflects the macrocosm, the bigger story. So my microcosm. I am a transgender man, which, I don't know, some of you may not know what that means. It means I was born biologically female, and I transitioned 3 years ago to become a man. And over the last few years, or the last couple of years, I made a show in collaboration with another theatre company called Rum and Clay called Testosterone. And I use my own autobiographical experiences in the show, and it's set in my first moment, the first time that I ever enter a male changing room. And it's a quest for masculine identity. It's me trying to navigate my way through the world of men and understand where I fit in. And the show poses questions such as, when did I become a man? I mean, did I become a man when I first decided I wanted to be one? Or was it when I had my first hormone injection? Or was it when I was perceived as a man? I mean, what is a man? I mean, when did you become a man or a woman? I mean, that might seem a really silly question, but actually I think there's something very interesting in it. Did you become a man or a woman before you were born? Or was it when you knew what the difference between a boy and a girl was? Or was it later than that when people started to treat you in certain ways? I think these are really, really important questions to ask ourselves. And the next question I ask myself when I'm making a piece of work is, why now? Why is it important to tell this story now? How do I contextualize it? And the answer with this piece of work was that we are now having a conversation about gender and identity more than ever. I'm sure lots of you read about the recent Harvey Weinstein allegations and how that's led to story after story coming out about male domination, about men abusing their power, their place in a very patriarchal system, and sort of reigning over other people. And, you know, this subject seemed to me ripe to make a piece of work about. And so I asked myself, what does my little story, how does it serve this larger issue of identity? And the answer was that I guess I'm in a unique position. I have lived as both a man and a woman, and I've experienced firsthand the differences between them. And I guess I can say with some authority that, I don't know, as a man, I feel safer when I walk down a street at night. I also feel that when I'm talking to someone on the phone in a kind of formal capacity, that I'm taken more seriously. I mean, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't be the case, but in my experience, it is. And I also noticed negative things. So, for example, I was coming back from a holiday a couple of years ago, and I'd lived as a man for about a year at that point, and I had a fight with a flight attendant during the flight, and for some reason I must have been feeling very vulnerable or something, I don't know. I burst out crying after we had this argument, and it was very embarrassing, and we were all disembarking the plane, and I was kind of, I'm sure, you know, you may at some point in your lives have cried in this way, where you're kind of uncontrollably sobbing like a child, and I was just going, and the other passengers, of course, noticed me uncontrollably sobbing, and nobody did anything. Nobody said, "Are you okay?" or offered me a tissue. And I realized then, in that moment, that it's deemed unnatural and inappropriate for men to cry. And things like hugging. I've had to sort of adapt the way that I now hug my male friends. There's this sort of unspoken rule that we kind of hold each other at arm's length, and we have this very kind of, you know, mechanical pat on the back, and then we disengage from each other. You know, which is all very strange. And then I started looking into statistics and found out that 2/3 of the world's suicides are done by men. And surely men are not born biologically predisposed to be more suicidal than women. Clearly, it's a cultural thing, right? And, you know, of course, in my work and in my transition, I explored and experienced many, you know, incredibly positive things about masculinity, and, you know, very touching things like the arenas in which a man can be emotional and can be tactile, like sport, for instance. But I felt that if I could use my little stories to somehow, I don't know, shed some light on this bigger issue of identity, then I was doing something right. Now, I guess I bring myself back to the question I asked myself at the beginning. why do I make theatre? And I guess I make it because I want to honour, to celebrate, to defy, to challenge, and all manner of other verbs. But if I have to bring it down to one, it's most importantly to question. And theatre is my medium to do this, and of course it may not be yours. But if I can leave you with one thing today, I would urge you, through whatever means, whether it's science, geography, history, politics, music, whatever, ask questions. Ask questions of yourself and of the world around you, because questions open us up to a discourse. They allow us to admit that we might not know all the answers, and they take us sometimes somewhere really interesting. And questions allow us to look at ourselves, our little stories, our identities, and kind of understand how they impact the greater world. So, thank you very much.